All right, so why should you listen to some random dude in a white t-shirt standing in front of a whiteboard? My name's Matt. I'm a current strategy associate at Google. Prior to that was a consultant at BCG. And today I'm going to walk you through a McKinsey style case and how I would solve it. Now, keep in mind that there are multiple ways to get to the right solution in a case. And so what I'm going to show you today is just my approach. Feel free to take a different approach if you think that is more appropriate. But the reason why I'm making this video today is because I've made similar case walkthroughs in the past and have received really good feedback. And so today we're going to do a McKinsey style case interview, and I'm going to walk you through my thought process so that you can understand a little bit better what to expect from a case interview and what the typical flow of a case should sound like. Hope this helps. Let's get right into it. All right, so the case we're going to do today is about a company called SuperSoda. So our client is SuperSoda, a top 3 beverage producer in the United States that has approached McKinsey for help designing its product launch strategy. So as an integrated beverage company, SuperSoda leads its own brand design, marketing, and sales efforts. The company also owns its entire beverage supply chain, including production of concentrates, bottling and packaging, and distribution to retail outlets. SuperSoda has a considerable number of brands across carbonated and non-carbonated drinks, 5 large bottling plants throughout the country, and distribution agreements with most major retailers. SuperSoda is evaluating the launch of a new product, a flavored sports drink called Electrolyte. Sports drinks are usually designed to replenish energy with sugar and electrolytes or salts in the body. However, Electrolyte has been formulated to focus more on the replenishment of electrolytes and has a lower sugar content compared to most other sports drinks. The company expects this new beverage to capitalize on the recent trend away from high sugar products. The Vice President of Marketing has asked McKinsey to help analyze key factors surrounding the launch of Electrolyte and its own internal capabilities to support that effort. Okay, so the first question is, what key factors should SuperSoda consider when deciding whether or not to launch Electrolyte? All right, so the first thing that we always want to do when we are given a case prompt is we want to obviously take quick notes while the interviewer is giving you the prompt. And so I'm just going to write down really quickly some key notes that I heard during the initial readout of the prompt. Okay, so basically what I've done here is I have written down a quick summary of what I heard. So I wrote that SuperSoda is a beverage producer. They are evaluating the launch of a new drink called Electrolyte. And the overarching question here is, what should they consider when thinking about whether or not to launch this new product? And I've also noted here that Electrolyte has a lower sugar content than most other sports drinks in the market, okay? So don't overthink this part, just take quick notes, and immediately after you take notes, you want to basically restate to the interviewer what you heard to make sure that you understand it fully, and also ask a few clarifying questions. Now, the reason why you want to ask clarifying questions is not only to make sure that you understand the prompt correctly and to dig maybe a little bit deeper, but also because you really need to demonstrate to the interviewer that you are listening and thinking thoughtfully about the prompt and the company. And so even if you don't really have any major questions, I highly recommend that you still come up with at least 1 or 2 questions that you can ask the interviewer before you start thinking about your framework. Okay, so I've just put together 3 quick clarifying questions. Now, I want to caveat that you do not need to ask the questions that I've come up with. You can come up with different ones. These are just the ones that came to mind for me, and I'll just walk you through each. So the first one is, have they tried anything already? This basically just means, has the company done any research, or has management tried anything to test whether or not launching this new product into the market would be a success or not? And this is just really to see if they have any sort of like pre-existing information that could potentially help you out in the case. Now, oftentimes your interviewer is probably just going to say, no, they haven't done anything, and which is why they've hired you. But it's just a good question to ask that I view as really no regrets. The second question that I've put together is, what markets are they targeting? And so this is a good question to ask because whenever we're thinking about launching a new product, one of the biggest questions is, where are we going to launch it, right? Is it going to be localized to the East Coast in the US, or is it going to be across the entire nation? Is it going to be in multiple countries? Are we going to be focused on North America only, or are we also going to go into APAC and EMEA? Thinking about these things is really important, which is why I've asked here if they're targeting any specific markets. Because depending on what market that they want to launch the new product in, this is going to dictate their strategy. Now, the third question that I've also mentioned is, have any competitors launched similar products? Now, I know that the initial prompt said that this new product was supposed to be differentiated based on the fact that it had lower sugar content, But a question that I still have is, has anyone already launched a similar low sugar energy drink into the market? It's very possible that one of their competitors could have already beat them to the punch. And so, this might not mean that they shouldn't launch the product, but it would mean that we would have to be thoughtful about how we position our product against the competitor's existing product. But anyways, after you come up with your clarifying questions and you ask the interviewer, the next thing you're going to do is you are going to start building your framework. And so what is a framework? Well, I know a lot of you probably already know, but if you don't, a framework is just a set of key buckets that you as the interviewer would like to investigate and learn a little bit more in order to get to the root cause of the problem, or in this case, learning a little bit more about what might inform our product launch strategy. And so some general rules of thumb with frameworks is you want to make them as McKinsey as possible, which means mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, simply meaning that the buckets, the topics in your framework should not have any kind of overlap if possible. And also they should encompass the entire universe of possibilities, because the last thing you want is to miss out on a option that just simply wasn't included in your framework, but potentially could be the key to the case. And so the way you want to go about creating your framework is you want to tell the interviewer, okay, great, can I take 30 seconds or a minute to just structure my thoughts? And they will always say yes. And this is your cue to kind of go ahead and start building out a framework. Now, in practice, how do you do this? Well, the typical way that you want to build a framework is you want to make a list with multiple buckets, as I mentioned. And so, for example, even something as simple as this, 1, 2, 3, could function as a framework. Now, obviously, you're going to need to put some thought into what goes into each of these rows, but at the core, this in and of itself could be a framework. I would highly recommend that you have at least 3 buckets when coming up with a framework, but no more than 5, because less than 3 is a little bit too simplistic sometimes, and greater than 5 can be a little bit too much. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put together a quick framework here. Okay, so I've put together a quick framework right here, and see if you can even see that. Basically what I've taken here is what's known as the business situation framework. It's a very common framework, but it works very well with a lot of consulting cases. And to walk you through each of the buckets, the way that I would present this to an interviewer is I would say, okay, great. So there are, broadly speaking, 4 buckets that I would want to consider when thinking about the product launch strategy for this business, for this new product. The first is going to be the customer. The second is going to be the competition. The third is going to be the company itself. And the fourth is going to be the product. And I'll now talk a little bit about each of these buckets. So going back to my first bucket, which is the customer. Here I would be most interested in, 1, the customer segmentation, otherwise known as the different customer groups that we are going to be going after. For example, are we going after wealthy individuals with a lot of income that would be interested in this kind of product, or are we going after the lower income consumer? And second, customer preferences. What does our target customer value and what do they care about? Because this is going to inform how we actually think about launching the product. Second, competition. Talking a little bit here, there's 2 things that I'm most interested in. The first is the market for these kinds of quote-unquote healthy, low-sugar energy drinks. Is it a large market? Is it a small market? If it's a large market, then maybe it's a good idea to enter this market. If it's small, maybe not so much. We can't really make this decision in isolation, but it will inform our ultimate recommendation. And kind of tied to that is the growth of the market. Is this market growing or is it shrinking? If it is a small market, but it is growing, then that is a good sign. But conversely, if it is a large market, but shrinking, then maybe we need to be a little bit more careful about this. And secondly, under competition, who are the competitors that currently play? I'm sure there are other beverage companies out there who have tried something similar or are currently competing with us in the energy drink market. Who are they? How many of them are there? How big are they? Is this a market with a lot of small players, aka a fragmented market? Or is it a market with a few key players that dominate the space, which would make it quite difficult for a new entrant to come in? Now, thirdly, the company. I'm interested in 2 things. What do our supply chain capabilities look like? And 2, what about our sales and marketing capabilities? And specifically, when I talk about supply chain, I'm talking about the strength of our supply chain. Because if we have a very strong supply chain, this will make it easier for us to launch a new product. Now, it sounds like we do have a very strong supply chain, given the information at the beginning of the case that was given to us, right? They own end-to-end the distribution and bottling. which gives them a lot of control. They also have 5 very large bottling plants. That is a very good sign for us, because then we don't have to depend on third-party providers or other partners, basically, to help us with launching this new product. And then with sales and marketing, here I'd want to just better understand, hey, how strong is our sales and marketing team? And do they have experience in the past with launching a new product in this manner? Finally, moving to the product, there's 3 buckets here that I've put down. The first is, what is our cost to produce this new product? Second is, what are we pricing it at? Because again, very important to consider, because our pricing is going to ultimately also influence our product positioning, which is the third bucket. And the product positioning is a fancy word for basically when a consumer sees our product on the shelves, what do we want them to think? What associations do we want people to have with our new product? You know, when you see a bottle of Coke at Walmart, what sort of associations do you get from that? In that same way, we also really want to care about our product positioning, because especially if this is a new market, the positioning is going to heavily dictate the reaction that we get, and also whether or not we end up targeting the right people, right? So this is the framework that I've put together. I want to caveat that this is not the only thing that could work. This is just an easy framework for people to use that works with probably 90% of business strategy cases. And so that's why I use it to teach. But in reality, you could technically come up with an unlimited number of frameworks that could hypothetically work for this kind of a question. But basically, you want to present the framework to your interviewer and walk them through those buckets as I just did to you. And from there, there's 2 things that could happen. One is the interviewer could point you towards a certain bucket, which is what's known as interviewer-led cases, where the interviewer is sort of guiding you towards the right approach. Or if you're doing an interviewee-led case, they might ask you, okay, so which bucket do you think is most interesting and that you want to look into first? And then the onus is on you to then identify the bucket in your framework that you think is most relevant and ask some more questions related to that. But in this case, because this is a McKinsey style case, McKinsey cases are usually interviewer-led. And so the interviewer is basically going to lead us to the second question, which is, after reviewing the factors that Super Soda should consider when deciding whether to launch electrolyte, your team wants to understand the beverage market and consumer preferences to gauge the potential success of electrolyte. Your team has gathered the following information about the US sports drink market. The information shows an estimated share of electrolyte drinks, as well as the current share for the 2 main electrolyte products, Cool Sweat and Recover Plus. Okay, so now they're going to give us an exhibit, basically showing us the share of the US sports drink market. And so a quick rule of thumb is that whenever you are given any kind of exhibit in a case interview, the first thing that your brain is often going to want to do is you're going to start wanting to think about like things that you should say, right? And you want to sound smart or something. And so you want to tell the interviewer some insight that you just thought of. But before you do that, I implore you, my recommendation is that you should actually first just talk aloud and describe what you are seeing to the interviewer. And so the way I would go about this is I would say, okay, so this is really interesting. So it looks like we've been given some information related to the total market for US sports drinks, which is about 8 billion gallons. And we've also been given some detail about the electrolyte drinks market, which is only about 5% of the total US sports drink market. And I can see here that there's a few key competitors in the electrolyte drinks market, Cool Sweat and Recover Plus, that we might need to watch out for. And so the reason why I recommend just restating what you see is because this often buys you time and allows you to sort of process the information a little bit easier. And I've often found that by speaking aloud, my brain just understands what I'm seeing a little bit better than if I were to just silently stare at this exhibit and then suddenly try to come up with some key insight. Now, in this scenario, the interviewer is going to actually start giving us more information because there's a quant question coming up. And they're going to tell us, based on the target price and upfront fixed costs, what share of the electrolyte drink market would electrolyte need to capture to break even? Here is some additional information for you to consider as you form your response. So electrolyte would launch in a 16-ounce format, or 1/8 of a gallon, at a price of $2 to retailers. To be able to launch electrolyte, Super Soda needs to bear $40 million in total fixed costs, including marketing expenses and increased costs across its production and distribution network. And finally, the Vice President of Operations estimates that each bottle would cost $1.90 to produce and deliver in the new process. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just write down what I heard. Ideally, in a case scenario, you should be like taking notes so that like as they're saying it, you're getting these numbers down. But because for the purposes of today, I'm literally just writing on a whiteboard, I'm going to go ahead and write some stuff down here. Okay, so here I've basically just summarized the information that was given at the beginning of this problem, which is we have a 16-ounce format. It's going to be priced at $2 a bottle, and it's going to cost us $1.90 to produce. And there's also going to be $40 million in fixed costs associated with this new product. And then finally, we're given some market data as well. So we can see the total market for energy drinks is 8 billion gallons, and 5% of that is the electrolyte drinks market, of which 20% is Cool Sweat and 10% is Recover Plus. Now, the question we were asked is, what share do we need as electrolyte in order to break even? And so when you hear the word break even, the first thing you should be thinking of is profit, okay? And costs, because break even basically means how much do we need to make in order to recoup our upfront investment. And so the way I would go about this is basically I would first try to calculate the per unit profit that we're getting from each sale of this new drink, right? So unit profit is basically what we're selling it for, which is the price of $2 per bottle minus the cost per bottle, which we were given was $1.90. And so how many units do we basically need to sell in order to recoup this $40 million? Well, the way you should do this is divide that 40 million by this profit per bottle. So like, I'm just gonna be super clear here and say 10 cents per bottle. That's the unit that we're dealing with here. And so number of bottles to break even equals $40 million in fixed costs divided by 10 cents per bottle, okay? So, and now some of you might be wondering, how am I supposed to do this math in my head? Well, I'll show you. So 40 million is a pretty big and round number, which is good for us. But then when we divide by 10 cents, some of you might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable with this math. Now, what we have to remember is that 0.1 is the same as 1 over 10, right? And if you guys paid attention in basic division and multiplication class or in basic math class, then you should know that when you divide by a fraction, you flip it and you multiply by the denominator. And so this is the same thing as 40 million times 10, which actually gets us to 400 million. Now, you have to be careful here though, because 400 million, what is that? Is that dollars or bottles? It's bottles, because the dollar signs here cancel out. And so it's actually 40 million bottles that you need to sell in order to break even. Now, some of you may have gotten to this number without having to watch me do it. You might be patting yourself on the back right now, but we're not done yet. The question, if you remember, was what share of the electrolyte drink market do we need to break even? And so I actually forgot to write this earlier, but we were also given an important detail in the beginning of this question, which is that, okay, the bottles are launched in a 16-ounce format, otherwise known as 1/8 of a gallon. Now, why is this important? Well, we need to somehow now convert the 400 million bottles into like a volume unit. So what does 400 million bottles mean in terms of gallons? How many gallons is that? And the way that we're going to get to that is we're going to multiply the 400 million bottles times 1/8 of a gallon. And so 400 million bottles times 1/8 of a gallon is just 50 million gallons, okay? And the reason why I wanted to convert this to gallons is because the market share data that we have is in gallons. And so we know that the total market for sports drinks is 8 billion gallons. Now, 5% of that 8 billion is electrolytes, right? And so I'm gonna start squatting. And so 8 billion gallons times 5% is going to equal whatever the electrolyte drinks market is. Now, again, some of you might be feeling a little bit intimidated by this multiplication here because you're multiplying a massive number by a percentage. Now, the easy way to do this is you can easily take 10% of any number, right? Because you just literally take 1 0 off of the right side. You move the decimal place by 1 position when you multiply it by 10%. And 5% is just half of 10%. So first let's take 10% of 8 billion and then let's just divide it by 2. Easy, right? So 10% of 8 billion is 800 million. Half of 800 million is 400 million. And so that's an easy way. So now you know that the entire electrolyte drinks market is 400 million gallons, okay? And so let's take a step back now, because I've done a lot of math. Why did I want to figure out what this 5% was in gallons? Well, the question that we're trying to get to is what share of the electrolyte drinks market do we need to break even? And we figured out how many bottles we're going to produce to break even. It's that 50 million gallons worth of drink. But the last thing we need is to divide it by the total market for electrolyte drinks, which we've now learned is $400 million. So 50 divided by 400 is going to be our answer. Now 50 divided by 400 is the same as 1/8. 1/8 is the same as roughly 12.5%, I think. And so the answer, very small down there, is 12.5%. We need 12.5% of the electrolyte drinks market in order to break even. Now I know that this was an absolute ton of math, and if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now, don't worry. These kinds of quantitative questions get much easier with practice. And so the next thing that you always want to do after completing the quant portion of a case is you want to take a step back, absorb what you've just learned, and think about what this means in the context of the case and whether or not you think this is realistic or not. So for example, I would say to the interviewer, okay, so I've learned now that we need roughly 12.5% of the market in order to break even. Now, does this number feel attainable to me? Well, given what we know about this market, it looks like only about 30% is dominated by these major two players. 70% is taken up by other, which I would assume would be smaller players with less than 10% market share. And so given that, I would think it would be reasonable to assume that a competent new entrant with the right marketing strategy and the right product positioning would be able to capture 12.5% of this market. Now, under what time frame? I don't know. That would depend. But seeing this 12.5% and seeing that only 30% is taken up by the top two competitors gives me a lot of comfort around that. Okay? So you just want to give your reaction, demonstrate some critical thinking, and show that you're thinking about what the numbers even mean in the context of the project. Okay, but now we're going to move to the third question. And so the interviewer would basically react to whatever you discussed in the second question and then push you towards the third question because this is an interviewer-led case. And so the third question is, Super Soda executives believe that the company's position as a top 3 beverage company gives it strategic impetus towards achieving the desired market share. However, they ask the team to outline what would be needed to achieve the target 12.5% market share of the electrolytes drink market. What would Super Soda need to do to gain the required market share for electrolyte following its launch? Okay, so basically this third part of the case is what's known as a brainstorming section. And typically in a brainstorming section, you're just trying to come up with as many ideas as possible to the question, which in this case is what would they need to do in order to actually get that 12.5% market share? And so it's also okay here to ask for just 30 seconds if you don't have any ideas in mind. But if you do have a few ideas already in mind, feel free to just go ahead and start listing out ideas to your interviewer, because this part of the case tends to be a little bit more casual. So I'm actually going to move over here because I'm running out of real estate. Okay, so I've just taken some time to put together a few quick ideas, and basically I'll just walk you through what I am thinking. The first thing I put was competitive pricing. Now, why did I put this? Well, pricing is one of the most effective strategies when it comes to capturing market share, and if we're only thinking about capturing as much market share as possible, one of the most direct ways that the company can try and capture more customers is by lowering their prices to a very competitive price point. Now, there's a whole set of considerations that go into doing this because you don't want to completely obliterate your profit margins by lowering the price too much, but that is one lever that the company has at its disposal. The second thing is robust distribution. Now, the reason I bring this up is because distribution, especially when we're talking about CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, is extremely, extremely important, because if you aren't able to get your products into stores where your customers are, then how are you going to maximize your chances of making a sale? And so making sure that their distribution channels are set up properly so that they don't have any kind of bottlenecks, whether it be like at the bottling facility or with how many trucking shipments they can accomplish, or even like how many of the inputs needed for the drink they can get in their factories. These are really important things to consider to make sure that you are able to properly meet demand and not have a supply constraint. Now, finally, I've put sales and marketing campaigns, and I think this is a little bit self-explanatory, but again, sales and marketing is super important when we are launching a new product. We need to get the word out there that we are launching this new product, and we need to properly build awareness in the consumer's mind about this product so that they actually get off the couch and go and buy the product. Or if they're walking through a convenience store, for example, they see this product on the shelves and they think to themselves, oh, hey, I've seen this somewhere, let me try it. And so basically, these three things I think are critically important to consider. Now, are these the only three things that you should consider when thinking about, can we capture 12.5% market share? Absolutely not. you can come up with a much bigger list than I did, but in the context of a case, I would try to come up with at least 3 good, solid reasons that you can then discuss with your interviewer. Now this brings us to the end of the case, which is simply the recommendation and synthesis. Synthesis is just a fancy word for summing up everything that you've learned today and bundling it up into a nice, concise, presentable answer. And so the typical way that this is asked in case interviews is the interviewer will say, awesome, so the CEO of the company is now walking down the hall to the conference room where you and your team are posted up. And you have about 30 seconds before she walks in and she's going to ask for an update. What would you tell her based on what you've learned today? And so the way you always want to go about this is I would recommend taking like 30 seconds, okay? Don't just dive right into it. And just take a second to look over everything that you've learned today, okay? And think through what the key insights are and what they mean in terms of the product strategy and whether or not they should launch this product. And then come up with a few bullet points. And the structure that you generally want to follow is you want to first start with either restating the context, and make this super quick because you don't need to belabor the point here. The CEO already knows what's going on at the company, but you might want to restate it quickly, and then you want to give your recommendation. This is the meat of it. You want to follow up with some potential risks, and then you want to end with some next steps. And so broadly speaking, this structure works pretty well. I had a few people comment on one of my past videos asking whether or not restating the context was necessary. I would say no, it's not necessary, although I personally do appreciate restating the context just because it helps to ground yourself before you give the recommendation. And I think as long as you are keeping it very brief, like literally 10 seconds or less, then there's no problem with restating the context. And so basically an example of how I would give this recommendation and synthesize what I've learned from this case today is I would say something along the lines of, awesome, thanks so much for joining us. As a reminder, we've been working through the considerations for the product strategy for electrolyte, and our recommendation at this moment is to proceed with the launch, but also to give heavy consideration to how we go about the launch, because we've found through our analysis that we need to capture about 12.5% market share in order to break even. And some levers that we've thought about to achieve this 12.5% market share are ensuring that our pricing is competitive, making sure that our distribution channels are robust and able to meet demand, and finally, just dialing in our sales and marketing campaigns so that we are targeting the right customers where they are. Now, despite our optimistic outlook, there are obviously some risks as well, including the fact that our product launch strategy may not succeed as much as we anticipated due to the strength of our competitors or perhaps our inability to execute effectively on our distribution. But as a next step, I would recommend potentially doing some further research into what our competition is currently doing, and also understanding a little bit better what the potential demand for this new product will be so that our supply chain is prepared when the launch comes. Okay, so I hope that this video is helpful, and if you are currently working on your case interview prep and you've looked through a lot of different resources and maybe you're still stuck, you might want to also consider some one-on-one coaching with me as well, where I can walk you through the case and pinpoint exactly the areas that you can improve on. If that sounds interesting to you, then make sure to check out the link in the description below. But otherwise, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.